spoke to my dad on the phone the other day. I was like, oh my God, is that what I used to sound like? Maybe I still sound like that. But either way, a little bit more housekeeping before we get stuck into the topics. Anchor.fm/HLTV for the audio only options. A lot of people asking questions about that. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can find it over anchor.fm/HLTV, twitch.tv/HLTV.org. That's where you are now. On YouTube, it's www.hltv.org. Like that's the username. You can find it there, and on Twitter at HLTV Confirmed. So that's all the social stuff done. And we may as well get into this, boys, because there is a shitload to talk about. So let's kick off the recent news, Lucas. Okay, so we may as well start at the top, and that is with the top 20, right? Now, ROPS was just announced at number 7. We've only got 6 more players to go, and this is quickly coming to a head. It should be there just as Blast is kicking off. So that'll be interesting to finish off. But let's throw this one over to you, Striker, because I know that you've worked a lot on this, and you've been basically busy throughout the holidays on this. People at home have been asking a lot of questions, and one of the main ones that we've seen is about how many North American players showed up in the early stages of the top 20. You want to give some not justification, because you don't need to justify yourself on these things, but maybe so people can understand it a little bit better?
I mean, I feel like it's even maybe there weren't even enough in some people's eyes just because of they maybe didn't see how the competition looked over there, and they expected some players to be a little bit higher. Like people were complaining about Case Dorado and some of these Furia players to be a little bit too low. But I mean, it just comes down to them having to play in North America for most of the year. They didn't even play in Katowice, so early in the game Blast. I see a feedback. I hear feedback from you, Chad. By the way, I
You
hear
hear
myself
feedback
back.
from me.
Yeah. I think it's because I don't know.
Just turn down your
Hold up a second,
volume,
guys.
probably.
Let me work on this. You guys keep talking. Let me just turn this down. Maybe it'd be better now. We'll see.
We'll see. But yeah, it just comes down to the competition over in North America, and that's why the North American players were relatively low. A lot of people were surprised with Ali being that high, but I feel like he was pretty convincingly the best North American player the last year. So I feel like it wasn't a big surprise to me. So I was kind of surprised to see people bash on that quite a lot. I don't know if there's anything else that I can really say about it. You can just go through.
I guess like Chad's boy JKS is kind of a surprise. Like JKS and Crims maybe are the guys that most people didn't really think would get in. I feel like, but then you really have to go and look at like some of these stats that you can't even see on the webpage, or if you can, but people don't really look at them, which are like the play against like top 5, top 10 teams, and then like playoff records and like records and some of these like biggest events. Because in the past we had like the big event filter, and that kind of helped, and now with everything being online, it's really hard to like filter to useful stats on the website. So yeah, I don't know. Those were maybe the most confusing ones, I guess.
I guess a lot of people are also talking about somebody like Xantares not being there, which is pretty obvious that he's not going to be there now, by the way, with Surson being where he is, I think 10th, right? I guess with him, it's just like people, I'm not going to say that he's that padded, but Big obviously played in a lot of tournaments that were a lot lower down on the scale of the ranking or the competition, and that wasn't even considered for the ranking because it's just not big enough events, right, to make it onto that. So I guess if you look at the events where they played, the biggest ones, he did fine. He was probably on the edge of top 20. I think Peter's going to release the list of people who just barely didn't make it. Did he release it already?
Yeah.
Can we look at it? Because I haven't seen it
So
actually, just so I can say.
21 and then Mantu 22.
Oh, okay.
And then after that was a bunch of players, including Xantares, KD, and
Config was also a big name that people were saying a lot for top 20.
Sent it to you, Lucas, if you want to bring this up for people to have a look at on the stream here. Now, I just want to kind of make this people are always going to have biases towards
Yeah.
things. It's natural, right? Like people are going to have only watched a certain amount of events, or they're going to have more favored players, or maybe somebody who, you know, they thought had a good time from the games that they watched. And there's always going to be like a bias there. And the thing is, with these rankings, you guys are the ones setting the goalpost for how you determine what you think makes up these categories, right? And I think that's the hardest year you may have ever had to do it was
For sure.
2020 because of the regional restrictions, because of like the lack of lands, right? That's normally where we put all the pedigree and stuff. So this year, right, it's going to be very difficult for people to agree on a lot of these things. I don't think it's anywhere near as clear cut as what it could have been in the past. But the thing is, I know that, and I was actually playing some pugs the other day with a couple of pros, and I'm not trying to shout out. This is a reference point for you guys, and some of them were saying, oh, you know, maybe this year they should have done North America and Europe
Right.
separately, right? But then what do you do with the crossover events, right? Do you just grade them against their players back in their own country and say, well, they played against good Europeans, so we factor it? It all becomes very messy, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is the best way to describe 2020 was just a fucking mess. You know what I mean? So people, you might favorite players might not be in here. You know, players you think might be higher or deserve to be higher or whatever. They might miss out. But I
mean, just one thing that I'm gonna say
Yeah.
on top of that is just that people like often just go by the rating list and see somebody being really high, but you know, not making the end. But if you go through like some of these events, they didn't really get a lot of awards. They made up a lot of these numbers in like group stages before they got to like big stages. Maybe they didn't really show up in playoffs. You know, these things are things that really matter and make a big difference in the end in the ranking, because you know we're looking for like big players, you know, like the best players
Sure.
that showed up when it mattered at the best events and stuff like that. So it's these things are really important, and you can't just look into like basic lists of how people did over the year with the rating.
Yeah. Now, look, and I'm going to be completely honest. I read it at home. Like, this is something that I love seeing getting put out and reading the articles and hearing from the players and all that stuff. Like, I think from that side of things, it's really good. But in terms of like as the year goes, I don't sit down like you guys do and look at all the stats and the numbers and stuff. I obviously use the biases of like the events that I was obviously casting, which games I was working in certain circumstances. Maybe I missed like a blast thing while I was traveling or whatever, right? But if we just want to spitball, I think like people are going to be able to work out who the final six are, right? Like it has to be the big three. We all know Device, Zywoo, Simple, right? Those are the
Right.
I would assume in the top three. Alicia's got to be in here somewhere. So there's four. We need two more. Blame F and Nico, right? Those.
Alicia's already out. It's an 8.
Fuck, I missed that one.
Electronic.
That's yes. Okay. So with that in mind, with those final bits and bobs, we all know who it's going to be. It's just about the order of, right? So people can speculate that. They can have some fun with that, and we'll see where we go. But do we want to? Was there anything so far from the articles that stood out to you boys? Like any of the replies, any of the breakout players to look for this year? Was there anything that you thought was a surprise or was interesting?
A lot of people are talking about Flames, which is pretty interesting.
True.
I think he was picked by Rob today as well as the bold prediction. So that's like the third time he was picked, which is interesting. All of the Furia players literally cheated, just picked a player that's going to join them in like 5 days. That's kind of lame.
I mean, Elise did as well, so
I know, but it's like, come on.
It's
But
legit.
okay.
It's a legit pick, at least. I'm gonna give them that. We by the way, just for people who didn't notice, really, we were a little bit more strict with the bold predictions this year, so that there aren't like bullshit, you know, predictions like, I don't know who I should say, like
Last year we had that funny situation where Ethan was number 20 and his bold prediction was Brolan, and literally the next day Brolan was announced as number 19.
yeah, exactly.
Literally Brolan was better than him in that year. He's like, yeah, I'll be bold. This guy's gonna be good soon.
So yeah, we were a little bit more strict, you know, having some certain set of rules
Sure.
for what kind of a player they're allowed to pick, and so it's produced a lot more interesting answers than some of the last years.
Okay. Well, we'll see if any of those come to fruition, and we'll obviously keep following this and probably bringing up the final 6 on the next week's show whenever we do throw that in.